Tuesday evening edition of Freedom Link Radio, and joined tonight by Alfred Adask. And I've had him on once before, and it's, I'll tell you folks, not too many people get it like this man. And I'm so very, very happy to have him aboard. He's the host of American Independence Hour. He broadcasts 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 10 p.m. Central Time. And just an absolutely brilliant guy. And so glad to have him on the show. Welcome to the show, Alfred.
Hi, Joe. Pleasure to be here.
So can you give the listeners, I'd like to start off basically with a little background on you and what you went through, especially with the case that was brought against you with the state of Texas, because you kicked them in the pants. And I tell you, there are very few, I consider very few people heroes in my book, because really a hero is a guy that grasps knowledge, that grasps spirituality, understands them at its core, and defends it to the hilt. You know what I mean? And you did that, and you won. And
I'm glad you edited that comment. You didn't say to the death.
No, not to the death. No.
We'll go to the death.
No, so could you give the listeners a little background on what had happened to you?
The background of the case is that a husband, wife, and their corporation were sued by the Attorney General of the state of Texas in 2001. The investigation began. I'm not sure when the suit was actually filed, but the investigation began in 2001, and the suit was filed shortly thereafter. And they were sued for the manufacture and distribution of a controlled substance. The controlled substance was colloidal silver, which is just silver ions that are in suspension in distilled water. It's an effective and inexpensive antibiotic. The FDA initiated the lawsuit, but it was prosecuted by the Attorney General of the state of Texas and the Texas Department of State Health Services. The suit bounced around for a while. The original 3 defendants, husband-wife corporation, spent $160,000 on attorneys to defend. The attorney fees drove them into bankruptcy. The stress of bankruptcy drove them into divorce. And they split. They left Texas for parts unknown. Before they left, they sold part of their equipment. They didn't sell their business, but they sold some of their equipment and supplies to another man. And the Attorney General of Texas, therefore, added him, his corporation, and his trust as 3 more defendants in this case. That was about 2005 when they added the third man as his corporation and his trust as 3 more defendants. And he asked if I could assist, if I could provide any counsel on this. And I became involved, and I volunteered to be fiduciary for his trust, which was already a defendant. And the Attorney General turned around and made me a defendant. Now I'm the 7th defendant, the last defendant in the case, and each defendant is being threatened with fines of $25,000 a day. That's $9 million per year. I don't know how many people you got in the audience that have ever been sued by an attorney general, a state attorney general, from $9 million a year, but I wouldn't think there's too many. But It focuses the mind. You pay attention. And over the years, I've been a student of the Bible. I've got plenty more to learn, but I've been a student of the Bible. I'm a student of the Declaration of Independence, and I understand a few things. And when I read the relevant law on the definition of drugs, because this was ultimately, again, the manufacture and distribution of a controlled substance. This was the same law that's used, the same definition of drugs that's used for people that are doing heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine and so on.
Unbelievable.
I read the relevant law, and it said it used the phrase that it applied to man or other animals. And the first time I saw it, I thought, again, it's just the same story. You've heard me tell it before. You already know what I'm going to say. But I thought, why you damn fools? When you didn't write man or animals. You wrote man or other animals. And that means they deem man to be an animal. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying in the construction of the language there, the grammar?
Absolutely. Sure.
Now, I read that and I thought, why the damn fools? They didn't even know what they were doing when they wrote the law. And then I read a little further, and it said it again in the same definition of drugs. It says it twice, man or other animals. This is in the federal definition of drugs. Then I read it down in the Texas definition. Turned out they had the same thing. And I understood that this is not an accident, that the government regards us at law as nothing but a pack of animals. I understand a little about the Bible. I understand that at Genesis 1:26 through 28, it says, on the sixth day, God created man in God's image and gave man dominion over the animals.
Of course.
Under the Jewish and Christian and probably even the Muslim faith. I haven't been a student of Muslim faith, but I assume they have a Genesis that's much the same as ours.
Mm-hmm.
Man cannot be an animal. You understand? It says man and man only is made in God's image, and man is given dominion over the animals. We can't be animals under the Christian and Jewish and probably Muslim faiths.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that, atheists will say that we are animals, that we evolve from animals. And I mean, how degrading, you know what I mean? There's just a certain sense of degradation there. When you
There's
put yourself
more
in that
degradation in that than most people can imagine.
Exactly.
All right, it is an act of genocide, and that's not hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. You read the law on genocide. You understand that the first thing the Hutus do when they decide to chop up the Tutsis is they declare the Tutsis to be nothing but animals. If they are animals, you can kill them all, including the women and the children and the non-combatants. You understand that? One of the first things, and this is law that is understood around the world. When the Nazis took off after the Jews in the Holocaust in World War II, first thing they did was to declare all the Jews to be Untermenschen, meaning under, mention for men. It meant subhuman. It meant animals. And as animals, they could march them all into the camp and gas them. They could kill the women, they could kill the children, because they're just animals. You can exterminate them like a hive of wasps or a nest of rats. You can kill them all because they are animals. And here is our government declaring us to be animals. Absolute violation of religious freedom. All right? And I drafted a religious freedom defense. And the Attorney General of Texas, first thing they did is we had been receiving certified mail from the Assistant Attorney General who'd been handling the case every 2 to 6 weeks for, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. They were constantly sending more certified mail, which is very unnerving. You're being sued by these people. They're sending you the certified mail. Here comes the postman. He's got another package of certified mail. Oh, very unnerving. They went dead silent after giving us something every 2 to 6 weeks for at least a year. And they went dead silent for 5 months after we submitted the religious freedom defense. And then when they did come back, they spent the next 5 months, the chief administrative judge for Travis County, he took control of the case. They spent the next 5 months trying to negotiate a settlement. And they offered to drop all fines, all penalties. Now, again, we're talking about $25,000 a day plus.
Right.
They invested close to $500,000 in attorney fees, in costs for the pretrial investigation and the pretrial hearings. They'd spent very nearly $500,000 on this case.
What a waste of taxpayer money.
They would drop the whole thing if the other party, the third party, would simply agree to take a food manufacturer's license.
Unbelievable.
And then we had 2 hearings on jurisdiction. They declared they did have jurisdiction, and we haven't heard another word from them now since that was November 2007.
Wow. Well, everybody sit tight. We're just getting started with Alfred Adask. If you visit his website, adask.wordpress.com, you can read a lot of his blog entries, a lot of good information. So sit tight. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Our email address is thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. That's thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. We're joined this evening by Alfred Adask, and I'll tell you, it's an absolute treat to have you here. And I want to go back to your interview with Alex Jones, And you brought up spirituality and just how important it is to understand where the crux of the problem is that we face today, where the real tension lies. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
I can tell you what I think about it, and I can tell you that one of the stories in the Bible that resonates with me is the story of Jacob and Esau, two twins born from the same mother, conceived at basically the same time, but Esau was firstborn. He was the first one out of the womb, and therefore he was entitled to the birthright that attaches to the firstborn. According to the Bible, legend, whatever, Jacob, as an infant coming out of the womb, had his hand on Esau's heel, right?
Right.
The implication is that even in the womb, Jacob wanted the birthrights. He didn't want Esau to be first. Jacob wanted to be first, and somehow he knew that if he came out second out of the womb, he wouldn't get the birthrights. He was arguably fighting for those birthrights, and they flow ultimately from God. He was struggling for them even while he was in the womb. The two brothers grew up. Esau is a man's man. He's described as a hairy man in the Bible. He's the kind of guy you want with you if you're going to war. You want him with you if you're going out to a bar to chase wild women. You want him with you if you are changing the transmission on your car. Esau is a man's man. Understand? And he was his father Isaac's favorite. He just couldn't get enough of Esau. Esau was a hell of a guy. Jacob was a little rat. He was a conniving, lying little SOB. And a mama's boy, right? You read, he deceived his father when people thought his father was dying. He later deceived his father into giving him the blessings that should have been bestowed on Esau. He dressed up in lambskin to pretend to have hair on his arms. He wore Esau's clothes so he would smell like Esau. His father was blind. Isaac was blind at the time. Esau bestowed the blessing that he intended to give to Isaac bestowed the blessing that he intended to give to Esau. He gave that blessing to Jacob. And Jacob got it by lying to his father while his father is presumably dying. Jacob is not a nice guy. But before this happened, you have all heard the famous story of trading your rights for a bowl of pottage.
Sure.
And that's what Esau did. He came back from hard work, or some stories say he came back from a war. And he was so hungry, he said, I'd do anything to get something to eat. And Jacob said, I'll give you a bowl of pottage if you'll give me the birthright. Will you give me your birthright? And Esau said, sure. What the heck? I don't need any birthright. I'm a big man. You understand? I'm a hairy guy. I can handle a situation. He surrendered his birthright for a bowl of pottage. Everyone's heard that, but very few people understand the significance, or at least the potential significance. Later in the Bible, there are two instances that I'm aware of where God says he's speaking and he's talking. He says, Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated.
That's heavy.
And he never says, so far as I know, there's no explanation in the Bible as to why God loved Jacob and he hated Esau. Esau was the kind of guy you'd suspect everybody. He's the quarterback on a high school football team. You understand? He's the number one guy. Everybody should love Esau. But God said, I love Jacob and I hate Esau. Why did he hate Esau? I believe it's because Esau despised the birthright. Esau said, I don't need that damn birthright. Just give me a bowl of pottage. I'm a hungry man. When you despise the birthright, you despise the God that gave it to you. When the Old Testament says he is a jealous God, I don't think he's going to put up with that crap. Now, it doesn't say this in the Bible. This is my interpretation. But when you have rights given you by God and you turn your back on him and say, hey, I don't need that. I got something really good going on over here. Give me a bowl of pottage. Serve up another bowl of pottage, will you? If Esau's example is an illustration, it is extraordinarily dangerous to turn your back on those God-given rights. Jacob, on the other hand, fought for him from the time he was in the womb. He even lied and cheated to get him. He wanted him. He knew that those God-given rights were the most important thing and the most valuable thing he could have in life. And God says, Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated, which brings me to the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence says in the second sentence, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These unalienable rights flow from God. Third sentence in the Declaration says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The first half of that sentence says that to secure these rights. Which rights? The God-given unalienable rights referenced in the previous sentence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. They are telling us the purpose of government as envisioned by the founding fathers was to secure to every man, woman, and even unborn child the God-given unalienable rights. They had to secure those rights even if you don't know what they are. But what's happened over time is, as a nation, we have forgotten those God-given unalienable rights. We have settled for civil rights. We have settled for easy credit. We've settled for a bunch of stuff, but we have forgotten the God-given unalienable rights. And this is powerful and it's important because we are the only nation in Western history, at least since the time of Judges in the Old Testament. We are the only nation in the world that said all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. No one else operates on that premise, or at least started on that premise. And this is the foundation for the spiritual warfare that's going on here. I went through a divorce in 1983. Became a student of the legal system. One thing led to another, and I started publishing a magazine called The Anti-Shyster in 1990. And after I'd got into a couple of years, I wasn't a spiritual person per se. I got into it a couple of years, and I began to see that there was something going on. I couldn't articulate it, but I could sense it. There was a war going on against the United States of America. You could catch glimpses of it throughout our history. There had been powerful forces aligned against us, not for the purpose of bombing New York or bombing Washington, D.C., but it was a war against the fundamental idea on which this country was built. And it's persisted for 2 centuries. And they're winning. They've been winning. And yes, the war is to remove us from memory of those God-given unalienable rights. Remove us from understanding them. And when we forget them, we have, in my opinion, perhaps emulated Esau when he traded his God-given birthright for a bowl of pottage. As a nation, we've done much the same. And if the story of Esau is, my interpretation and my speculation, if that has any validity, we are in significant peril.
Absolutely.
Unless we turn around and grab hold, recognize this is spiritual warfare. This is exactly why the government has defined the people to be animals. And we found it in drug laws. We found it.
Yep, you're right. No, we find it everywhere. It's prevalent in today's society, and we'll continue this conversation with Alfred when we get back from break, folks. We'll also take your phone calls. You're listening to Freedom Link Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away. 3 minutes. We'll be right back. It's Freedom Link Radio time again. It's 33 after the hour, and we're here with our guest, Alfred Adask. And it's just a pleasure to have somebody with so much wisdom and so much to give. Remember, folks, I always harp on this. Knowledge is power. And without that knowledge, simply put, you can disarm the enemy with knowledge. And Alfred's shown that now on multiple occasions. I want to go to the phones real quick because you got a fan here, Alfred, and I want to bring him on. Rich from Florida, you're live on the air.
Hey, hi, Al. I've listened to you for many years on AVR, and I'm a fan of Oracle and Orion and AVR, and I got to tell you, you saved a lot of people that I know's houses with the Show Me the Note shows that you did. I recorded them on the CD, gave them to people, and they found a lawyer in Jacksonville that's like super huge going after these bankers, and all the information that you give on natural law and what our rights are. I mean, you know, you are the best. I mean, the only one that comes close to you is Marcel, and when he gets out, I'm going to get him on the show, too. You know what I'm speaking of, right? The Constitutional Crusader?
No, I can't say that I do off the top of my head, but I can tell you one thing that, you know, you do this stuff, and some people... And some people have a high opinion of what I'm doing, and some people, I get some criticism from time to time from government entities and that sort of thing. But what it comes down to, and it sounds, a lot of people find this hard to believe, but there's no doubt in my mind, sometimes the good Lord lets me see. And it's not something as if I'm seeing on my own or by myself, and it's not something where you sit back and say, man, am I ever smart? Now, sometimes the good Lord just literally sticks your nose in a book and says, read this, dummy. And I do. And all of a sudden you say, oh, my gosh, look at that. But it's like that. And it's that's the sort of statement that I know the average person say, oh, that's just crazy talk. You wait. You get into this, you start researching, you get serious, you will see where suddenly you'll crack in a book open to exactly the page you need. You've never been there before, and you find things you weren't even, there's something astonishing going on, and again, it's good Lord lets me see. Don't see clearly, don't see perfectly, but I see a lot.
I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me.
Spiritually, I think a lot of people need to look past just the fact that there's corruption going on, and they need to spiritually ask, what can I do? What am I going to do? And I like I said, I even saw, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you were featured. You did an interview with 60 Minutes. Yep. And rather than show everything that you said, they just cropped one little piece of what you said and crucified you on national television to make it look like you were saying that the right to bear arms is so that we can kill politicians, to make you look like you're some radical nutbag. When I know for a fact that you have been explaining what our rights are for many, many years, and I've been a supporter of yours, and I've listened to you. And when I heard how they just spliced a couple little things that you said to try to make you out to be like a David Koresh, it really infuriated many people in the Patriot Radio Freedom Networks. They were all talking about that now, and keep on keeping on. We love you. I just wanted to call to say you're one of the best, and God bless you.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Rich.
For what it's worth, 60 Minutes could have done worse. All right, I was not complaining about what they put up on what they broadcast. I was actually interviewed for about an hour, and they pulled out, I don't know, 5 or 8 minutes altogether out of that hour at the most that they broadcast. And I know they could have done a worse job. But I also know, and what was most surprising, and I think it probably surprised 60 Minutes also, I don't doubt they were intending to do a hatchet job on me. Mm-hmm. And I'm told by other people who went to the 60 Minutes website and they monitored the email that went to 60 Minutes based on that interview. And the email was running 2-1 in my favor.
Well, good.
Meaning they tried to do a hatchet job, and nevertheless, I managed to connect with the public well enough where the majority of the people said, hey, this guy's okay. Well, that was great. You know, it would have been easy to have this go the other way, where 9 out of 10 people said, that man's crazy. Somebody needs to put him in jail. He's out of his damn mind. Nope. 2-1. They were coming down and say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. That had to be a sobering moment for people in 60 Minutes and perhaps even law enforcement, where they sit back and they say, oh, my God, the public's beginning to get this.
Well, knowledge is power. It really comes down to that. You know, if you have the knowledge, you can You can disarm your opponent.
It's not, it's not magical, all right,
No.
in the sense that you're guaranteed to win. But in that case that we talked about with the Attorney General, they'd invested 6 years and $500,000 million in that case before they just dropped it. That's virtually unprecedented. I don't think you can find another instance where any pro se litigant, some guy going in there without an attorney, the Attorney General's just going to drop a case, just drop it after they'd invested 6 years and $500,000 million?
Because I'll tell you, Alfred, I know exactly why this happened. It's the same reason why Jesse Ventura's case didn't get heard, is because this country relies so much now, instead of on the rule of law, on precedent. So if you go and you are given a trial, by jury of your peers, there's no way they're going to win that case.
Well, nothing's impossible.
Well, you know what I mean. Of course, but I mean, the odds are certainly in your favor, enough so for them to be scared enough to drop it totally.
It's not just a question of whether or not they would win or lose if we went to trial. The question is, the consequences of a loss for them are enormous. They're untenable. The war on drugs is based on a definition of drugs that defines the people to be animals. The war on drugs laid the foundation for much of the modern police state. It's based on a definition of drugs that defines the people to be animals. The police state gave us the prison industrial complex where they're selling thousands and millions of tons of concrete and steel to build prisons. And we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. And it's based to a large extent on a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals.
Right.
I'm the first one to read this law. The earliest time we saw this law, we've traced it back to 1906, Pure Food and Drug Act. First time we've been able to find it. The government has been treating us as animals for over a century. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm the first one to read the damn law and understand what it meant. It's certainly the first layman. I know that there's attorneys and politicians who get it, but they're not talking. They're not telling the public about it. What was my point? I kind of lost it. I had something I was hitting.
I do want to make a quick point about the prison system because you brought that up too. Oh. It's funny because in government contracting, anytime that you go out for a bid on a product that's going to be mass produced, the first thing that you do in government is you have to bounce it off the prison system. The prison system provides the cheapest labor out there, and you wouldn't believe the amount of stuff that the prison system manufactures for this country. It's unbelievable. It's a form of slave labor.
Sure, that's exactly what it is. They're bringing third world labor onto this labor costs into this country. Third world labor we call prisons.
It's prison camps. Exactly right.
That's exactly.
All right, we got about 2 minutes before break, so let's go to caller from Oregon. You're live on the air. Go ahead.
Hello, Joe. Alfred Adask. I'm a huge fan. I've listened to you on Coast to Coast before. I'm a frequent chatter in your chat room, Joe and Popeye. My username's Alf Bernanke. I was recently cut off from your chat room and kicked out without a warning. I understand. I don't like me either, you know what I'm saying? But no, I appreciate what you've done, Alfred Adask, and I was just wondering where you think we're going from here. What's the next step? I mean, if YU55 does not kill us tonight, what's going to happen next week? I'll take your answer off air.
I can't give you prophecy. I appreciate the call, Al. I can't give you prophecy. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can tell you that for me, I know what's going to happen for me. I read a Bible, and one of the verses that resonates with me is the Christ speaking, and he says, those who stand firm to the end shall be saved. All right? I'm going to stand firm to the end. I don't need to win, but I'm going to stand firm I don't need to win in this life, but I am going to stand firm to the end.
Amen to that. Ron Paul, who's running for president, of course, he focuses on the young people because he knows the battle isn't going to be won in a day or a week. It's going to take time. It's going to take time and perseverance. And we'll be right back after these short messages. You're listening to Freedom Link Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Here we are in the last segment of hour number one, joined by Alfred Adask. Now, Alfred, the whole goal of the powers that be, or government in general, is to seduce us into consent. Can you expand on that? Because, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that in your Alex Jones interview. And, I mean, can you reiterate that to my listeners?
Yes. Satan, this game, insofar as this is spiritual warfare, the game is not about taking your house or your car or your kids or your spouse or your land or your job or your money. None of that matters. If Satan's behind this and this is truly spiritual warfare, they are playing for your soul. That is the object of this particular contest. They're playing for your soul. And the problem Satan has is he can't just walk up, put a gun to your head, and march you down into hell. You cannot be compelled to go to hell. Nobody's going to hell who does not effectively choose to do so. It's up to you to volunteer into hell. And what Satan is trying to do, in my opinion, is to persuade us, to seduce us. He doesn't compel us. He's got to get you to consent and say, essentially, would you mind going to hell? And people say, well, no, it sounds okay to me. Is it warm down there? Yeah. You know, don't have to worry about paying any heating bills in the wintertime or whatever. The idea is they've got to catch your consent. They can't compel you. Again, Satan can come up, put a gun to your head. So what? You die as a martyr. He's doing you a favor. He won't do that. So we are dealing with a system that is not about compulsion, and that's hard for people to believe because we see the police state. We know there's cops out there that are thumping people on the head and so on. We understand there's compulsion, but the fundamental issue is to get people to consent to their own damnation in the same sense that Esau consented to his damnation. When he said, I don't give a damn about these birthrights. I don't need birthrights. When he despised the birthright by trading them for a bowl of pottage, he effectively despised God. And if the way I read the Bible is that God's not putting up with it. Now, other people can read the Bible a different way, and they can come to a different conclusion, but the way I'm seeing it, if God gives you those rights, you got to hang on. And you got to hang on tight. Like Jacob came back. He was fighting for those rights even out of the womb. He'd lie, cheat, and steal to get them. You got to hang on to them. You got to know them. You got to make the effort. You got to do some studying. You got to read. You got to understand. And then you got to fight for them. Under those circumstances, in my opinion, it's not a guaranteed, fast ticket to salvation, but you are at least not consenting to your own damnation by your self-imposed ignorance.
That's right.
By your refusal to read and to understand and to study. Every time you get out there and you got, hey, what time is Gilligan's Island on? Or whatever. You are effectively consenting to waste the life that God gave you. He gave us all kinds of things. He gives us a body. How many of us are smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol? I'm both a former alcoholic. I haven't had a drink in 34 years or something like that. But I had my head stuck in a beer bottle for a considerable period of time. I was despising the blessing God gave me by intoxicating this body God gave me. I was despising the blessing God gave me by smoking cigarettes. Insofar, I can make an argument. I won't tell you it's God's truth. I'm not telling you this is what God says. I don't know. But I can make an argument that when you light up that cigarette, you are implicitly, unwittingly perhaps, but you are implicitly despising the blessing God gave you. And from a spiritual perspective, it shouldn't be completely surprising if you wind up with something like lung cancer. God's coming back and say, hey, do not despise my blessings. This is no game. Well, I don't know if it's right. It's my opinion. And a gift, a blessing. Mm-hmm. It's not just your little truck to drive around in. You better take care of it. That's God's truck. He's letting you use this particular truck. Take care of it. Do not despise the blessing. Same thing is true with those unalienable rights declared in our Declaration of Independence. And the reason the government, again, they have declared us to be animals. Why? The Declaration says all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. There are no such unalienable rights for animals. If they can reduce you to the status of animals, you have no claim on the rights given by God. If you're willing to consent to that, if the government's, they've written the law, read it.
And
if you're willing to consent to it, then you have effectively traded your birthright for a bowl of pottage.
Right, and silence is consent in the eyes of the law. So just sitting on your hands or watching that Gilligan's Island, as you said, Alfred, I mean, you are consenting.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, same.
Again,
here.
I won't tell you that's God's truth. I won't say that's what God thinks, but that's what I think he might think, you know? So you do your own thinking and you come to your own conclusions.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm right there with you. I've kind of come to my own conclusion, and it's very similar to yours. And I preach to it all the time, you know, on the show, is that you have to understand your rights. You have to understand them. Make that like one of your number one priorities, because if you don't know what your rights are, how do you fight them when they come down, or when this police state, it's getting ever more present? Heck, in North Carolina, here, they can stop you and check your registration with no probable cause, your license. They can pull you over, set up checkpoints, and do that. TSA can grope you. They can grope your wife right next to you. And what's your form of redress, you know? If you try to take them to court for doing something lewd and inappropriate, they don't even hear your case.
Well, what you have to be prepared to do is anytime if you're dragged in, it's hard to sue the government. Very difficult to do. But if they come after you and you can devise a way to counterclaim, all right, you don't want to ever go to court as a defendant. Every single time anybody drags you into court, you want to counterclaim. You'll be in a position as a plaintiff. Defendants never win. They aren't always found guilty, but they expend legal fees and time and anxiety, and they're not compensated for it. The best they get is, not guilty, get out of here. And people think that's a victory. You lost a lot as a defendant. The only people who can win in court, other than the lawyers, of course, are the plaintiffs. You must go in, counterclaim. I don't care if they're suing you for anything. If you can find a means to counterclaim, from my perspective, that is the most effective strategy you can use.
It's fantastic information tonight, Alfred. And, can you give your website and the network that you're on for my listeners so that they know where to find you?
I'm on American Voice Radio, AVR, AmericanVoiceRadio.com. You can find, and the name of my blog is Adask, ADASK.wordpress.com. And, put Adask, ADASK. So far as I know, I'm the only man in the country with that last name. You put that into the Google search engine. It'll eventually get you wherever I might be writing or talking or whatever. But
you're a shining light for sure. In a
I'm just a watchman. I'm a blue collar guy. I'm a watchman on the wall. That's all it is. I'm a brown bagger. You understand? And
absolutely, absolutely.
It makes me a little uncomfortable to have people saying, you're doing this, that, or the other. Look, all I'm doing is reporting what the good Lord lets me see. All right? And I don't see clearly, I don't see perfectly, but that's all I'm doing. This is the truth is the good Lord's. The lies and the mistakes, they're mine.
He's blessed you with some incredible knowledge.
Well, it's not my knowledge. It's the good Lord's truth. If it has any value at all, it's the good Lord's truth. And,
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight. I know you got to get ready for yours, so
start up in about 4 minutes or so, 5 minutes, something like that.
You're welcome back anytime. Anytime you want to come
Joe,
on.
anytime you want to give me a call, and can't find anybody else to show up, I'm probably available. So, all right.
Hey, no sweat. Thanks for stopping by, Alfred.
Thanks very much, Joe. Have a good night.
You too. Wow, huh, Popeye? I mean that. I told you it'd be if I could only get him on for 2 hours. I mean, heck, Alex Jones gets him for an hour and a half. That stinks.
Well, he's a pretty deep guy.
I know, isn't it? It's 1 hour just doesn't do it justice.
I like how he's able to, make, take a story, from the Bible and be able to incorporate that into modern day things. And that's not because I'm a Bible thumper or anything like that. I don't even really believe in organized religion myself, but that doesn't mean that anybody else can't. But I like the way he's able to get that point across, because there's a lot of people that do still read the Bible and believe it 110%. And you know what? It's important that those people find out what's going on too, just like anybody else. And I think he has a really I was amazed at the way he could just very easily, flow from one thing to another, and it show how it dovetails, and it just obviously people listen to his show for a reason.
Absolutely. Well, that's the end of hour one, folks, but we're just getting started, because hour number 2, it's the Popeye and Joe Joseph show. So watch out, because we're gonna destroy the latest